My sons called it family time, then left me babysitting quadruplets while they went to a resort. I stood in my kitchen at 3 a.m. with 4 screaming babies and realized I had been nothing but free labor to them. The bitter truth of that moment still makes my hands shake when I think about it. I want to share something deeply personal with you today, something I kept hidden for so long because I was ashamed to admit what my own children had done to me. If my story resonates with you, if it helps you see your own situation more clearly, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. These stories need to reach the people who need them most, the ones sitting alone right now, wondering if they are being unreasonable for feeling hurt. I live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago, on the north side where the wind cuts through you in winter and the lakefront feels like it stretches into forever. My name is Dorothy, and I am 72 years old. I raised 3 sons in this city, worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse for 35 years, and thought I had built something meaningful with my family. My apartment has cream-colored walls that I painted myself 15 years ago, a floral couch I bought at an estate sale, and photos everywhere of my boys at different ages. There is Michael at his high school graduation, Thomas holding his first trophy, and James on his wedding day. I dusted those frames every single week. My daily routine before all this happened was simple and quiet. I would wake up at 6, make myself a cup of black coffee, and sit by the window watching the neighborhood come alive. The Polish bakery across the street would open its doors, and the smell of fresh bread would drift up to my window. I would do the crossword puzzle, water my plants, maybe call one of my sons to check in. Tuesdays I volunteered at the library, reading to children. Thursdays, I had a standing appointment to get my hair done at the salon 2 blocks over. Small pleasures, you understand, the kind of life you build when you think you have done your part and can finally rest. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was Michael, my eldest. His voice had that bright, excited quality that made me smile before I even knew what he was calling about. He and his wife Sarah had been blessed with quadruplets 2 years earlier, 4 beautiful little girls named Emma, Olivia, Sophia, and Isabella. Getting pregnant at their age had been a miracle, aided by fertility treatments, and those babies were the light of their lives. Michael worked in corporate finance downtown, something involving investments that I never quite understood. Sarah had been a dental hygienist before the babies came. Michael told me they wanted to plan a special family time together. He said they had been so consumed with the demands of raising 4 toddlers simultaneously that they needed to reconnect as a family unit. He painted this beautiful picture of all of us spending a week together at their house in the suburbs, bonding over the girls, sharing meals, creating memories. He said Thomas and James were coming too with their families. It would be like the old days, he said, when we would all gather for Sunday dinners and the house would be full of laughter and warmth. I felt something flutter in my chest when he described it. You have to understand, I had spent so many holidays alone in recent years. The boys were busy with their own lives, their own families. I understood that. I never wanted to be the demanding mother who guilted her children into visiting. But the loneliness had settled into my bones like the Chicago cold, and the idea of a full week surrounded by family felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. I said yes immediately. Of course I said yes. I started planning what I would bring, thinking about the games we could play with the girls, the stories I could tell them. I went to the store and bought little gifts for each of them, small stuffed animals that I wrapped carefully in bright paper. I picked out my nicest cardigans to wear, the blue one with the pearl buttons and the cream one with the delicate embroidery. I wanted to look put together, like a grandmother who had her life in order. The week before I was supposed to go to their house, I could barely sleep from excitement. I kept imagining all of us around the dinner table, the girls giggling in their high chairs, Michael and Sarah looking at me with gratitude and love. I thought about how I would finally get to be useful again, how my presence would matter. For so long, I had felt like a ghost in my own life, invisible and unnecessary. This felt like a chance to prove I still had value. I have always believed that family is everything. My own mother drilled that into me from childhood. She came to this country with nothing, worked in a factory, sacrificed everything to give us a better life. She taught me that you put family first, always, no matter what. You forgive, you help, you show up. That was the code I lived by. When my husband died of a heart attack 18 years ago, my sons rallied around me. They helped me with the funeral arrangements. They checked in on me. They made me feel less alone. I thought we had that kind of bond, unbreakable and true. So when Michael asked me to help with family time, I did not question the logistics. I did not ask why they needed a full week of help or what exactly my role would be. I just thought this was what mothers do. We step up. We sacrifice. We make things easier for our children because we love them. Isn't that what I had always done? When Michael needed money for his MBA program, I dipped into my small savings and gave it to him. When Thomas went through his divorce, I let him stay in my apartment for 6 months, rent-free. When James lost his job, I sent him checks every month until he got back on his feet. I had worked so hard my entire life. Those 35 years at the hospital were not easy. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I cleaned bedpans and held the hands of dying patients and came home with my feet swollen and my back aching. I did it so my boys could have good clothes, could go on school trips, could attend decent colleges. I put off my own dreams. I had wanted to be an art teacher once, to spend my days in a bright studio teaching children how to see the world through color and form. I loved to paint, loved the feel of the brush in my hand and the way colors could blend into something unexpected and beautiful. But life had other plans. I got pregnant with Michael at 22, married his father at 23, and the art teacher dream got packed away like my old canvases in the back of my closet. I told myself I would return to it someday, when the boys were grown, when I had time. But there was always something more pressing, always another bill to pay or crisis to manage. And now here I was, at 72, still waiting for that someday to arrive. I thought this family time would be different, though. I thought maybe, while I was there helping with the girls, I would have moments to sit and sketch. Maybe I would watch the girls play and capture their movements on paper. Maybe Michael and Sarah would see me as more than just an extra pair of hands. Maybe they would ask me about my life, my interests, my dreams deferred. The night before I was supposed to go to their house, I packed my small suitcase carefully. I folded my cardigans with tissue paper between them so they would not wrinkle. I packed my sketching pencils and a small pad of paper, just in case. I included the gifts for the girls and a bottle of wine for Michael and Sarah. I set my alarm for 5 in the morning so I could take the train out to the suburbs and arrive by 8 as Michael had requested. I did not sleep well that night. I kept thinking about my mother and how she would beam with pride seeing all of us together. I thought about my husband and wished he could be there to see the family we had created. I felt this warm, hopeful feeling spreading through my chest. Finally, I thought. Finally, I matter again. Looking back now, I can see how desperately I was clinging to the idea of being needed. I can see how I had built up this fantasy in my mind where my sons valued me not just for what I could do for them, but for who I was. I wanted so badly to believe that they saw me as essential, as someone whose presence made their lives richer. I wanted to believe I was more than just the woman who had raised them, more than just a convenient solution to their childcare problems. But I was wrong about everything. I arrived at their house in the suburbs on a bright Saturday morning in early September. The house was one of those newer constructions with clean lines and a 2-car garage set back from the street with a carefully maintained lawn. Michael had done well for himself. The house probably cost close to $1 million in their neighborhood. I felt a little flutter of pride looking at it. My son, the successful businessman with the big house and the beautiful family. Sarah answered the door with a distracted smile. She was already dressed in yoga pants and an athletic top, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked like she was ready to go somewhere. Behind her, I could hear the chaos of the quadruplets, their high-pitched voices calling out in that insistent way toddlers have. The house smelled like syrup and coffee and something slightly sour that I would later identify as spilled milk that had not been fully cleaned up. She gave me a quick hug and pulled me inside. The living room was an explosion of toys, sippy cups, and discarded clothing. There were gates blocking off various doorways and foam padding on sharp corners. The girls were in the family room, which was visible from the entrance, bouncing in their play yard and calling for attention. They were beautiful children, all with Sarah's blonde hair and Michael's dark eyes. Emma had a pacifier. Olivia was clutching a stuffed rabbit. Sophia was crying about something, and Isabella was trying to climb out of the play yard. Michael came down the stairs pulling a suitcase behind him. A suitcase. That should have been my first clue that something was wrong, but I was so caught up in greeting the girls and trying to process the chaos that I did not register it immediately. He kissed me on the cheek and said they were so glad I was there. He said the girls had been asking about Grandma all week. "Where is Thomas and James and their families?" I asked. I looked around expecting to see more people, more cousins for the girls to play with. "Oh," Michael said with a casual wave of his hand. "They are not coming until later in the week. It will just be us to start." Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling down. I smiled and went to the girls, crouching down to their level despite the protest from my knees. They looked at me with that serious curiosity small children have when trying to place a face they do not see often enough. I handed out the stuffed animals I had brought, and their faces lit up. That moment of joy, of feeling like I had done something right, almost made me forget my unease. Sarah was checking her watch. She looked at Michael and said something I did not quite catch. He nodded. Then Sarah turned to me with that same distracted smile and said they needed to go over a few things with me about the girls' schedule. She walked me to the kitchen where there was a printed document, multiple pages long, detailing every aspect of the Quadruplets' daily routine. Feeding times, nap times, diaper change protocols, what foods they would and would not eat, which girl had which comfort object, who needed their special blanket to sleep. I felt my stomach drop as I scanned the papers. This was not a casual family gathering. This was a detailed instruction manual. Michael came into the kitchen and put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Mom, we cannot thank you enough for doing this. We really need this break." "Break?" I said. "What break?" He exchanged a look with Sarah. They both suddenly looked uncomfortable. Sarah cleared her throat and said they had not wanted to burden me with the details, but they had booked a week at a resort downstate. It was their anniversary, she said. They had not had any time alone together since before the girls were born. They desperately needed to reconnect as a couple. The fertility treatments and the stress of raising quadruplets had taken such a toll on their marriage. Surely I understood. I stared at them. I looked at Michael, my firstborn, the boy I had rocked to sleep every night for years. I looked at Sarah, who I had welcomed into our family with open arms. I looked at the suitcase by the door, at their coordinated athleisure outfits, at the resort confirmation email open on Sarah's phone that I could just glimpse on the counter. "You are leaving," I said. "You are leaving me here alone with the babies." Michael had the decency to look slightly ashamed. He said not alone, exactly. He said they had a nanny scheduled to come a few hours each afternoon to help. He said the fridge was fully stocked. He said the girls were used to their routine, and once I got the hang of it, it would be easy. He said they would be back in a week, and we could all have that family dinner then. He said this was actually good practice for me to bond with the girls one-on-one. Sarah jumped in, her voice bright and artificially cheerful. She said most grandmothers would be thrilled at the chance to spend quality time with their grandchildren. She said they were trusting me with their most precious treasures. She said I should feel honored. Honored. That word landed like a slap. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell them this was not what I had agreed to. I wanted to grab my suitcase and walk out the door and take the train back to my quiet apartment where nobody used me and called it love. But I looked at the 4 little girls in the other room, innocent and unaware of the manipulation happening in the kitchen. I looked at my son's pleading eyes. I thought about how my mother would have reacted if I had refused to help family. I thought about the shame of admitting I had been tricked. So I said, okay. I said I would do it. Michael and Sarah left within the hour. They walked out the door with their matching suitcases and their excited whispers about spa treatments and couples massages and sleeping past 7 in the morning. Sarah blew kisses to the girls from the doorway. Michael told me to call if there was an emergency, but otherwise they were going to try to disconnect from their phones and really be present with each other. The door closed behind them, and I was left standing in a suburban house that was not mine, with 4 toddlers who barely knew me, for 7 days. The first day was a nightmare. The girls sensed something was wrong. They cried for their mother. They refused to eat the carefully portioned meals I prepared, according to the schedule. Emma threw her sippy cup at my head. Olivia had a meltdown about her socks, feeling wrong. Sophia would not nap. Isabella managed to get into the bathroom and unroll an entire roll of toilet paper into the toilet. I remember standing in the kitchen around noon that first day, staring at 4 plates of untouched macaroni and cheese. The girls were screaming in their high chairs, faces red with frustration and confusion. I could feel my own tears building behind my eyes. I had raised 3 boys. I thought I knew what I was doing. But 4 toddlers at once, 4 little personalities with different needs and wants all demanding attention simultaneously, was beyond anything I had experienced. Emma kept pulling at her bib, her little fingers working desperately to get it off while she wailed. Olivia had somehow gotten applesauce in her hair and was spreading it across the tray of her high chair like paint. Sophia was arching her back, trying to climb out of her seat, her face contorted with rage. And Isabella, sweet Isabella, had stopped crying and was just staring at me with these huge, accusing eyes that seemed to say, "Where is my real mother?" I tried everything I could think of. I sang songs I remembered from when my boys were little. I made funny faces. I offered different foods, different drinks, different toys. Nothing worked. The crying continued, relentless and piercing. My head started to throb. My hands shook as I wiped faces and cleaned up thrown food. By 2 in the afternoon, I had resorted to turning on the television, something the schedule explicitly said to avoid. But I needed 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes of relative quiet to catch my breath and figure out what to do next. The girls did settle somewhat, mesmerized by the bright colors and music of a children's show. I sank onto the couch and closed my eyes, feeling the tension in my shoulders, the ache in my lower back that was already becoming constant. That first night was worse. The schedule said bedtime was 7:30. I started the bedtime routine at 6:45, thinking I was giving myself plenty of time. Baths first, the schedule said. But bathing 4 toddlers was like trying to contain a flash flood. Water everywhere. Slippery bodies wriggling away from me, soap in eyes, screaming. By the time I got all 4 of them clean and into pajamas, it was past 8:30, and I was soaked through, my clothes clinging to me, my hair dripping. Then came the battle of getting them into their cribs. Each girl had a specific comfort object and a specific arrangement of blankets. Emma needed her purple elephant and her blanket with the satin edge touching her cheek. Olivia needed her rabbit and complete darkness. Sophia needed her pink bear and a nightlight. Isabella needed her yellow blanket and the door cracked open exactly 3 inches. I tried to remember all of it, following the detailed notes Sarah had left. But I mixed things up. I gave Emma the wrong blanket first. She threw it out of the crib and wailed. When I finally got her settled and moved to Olivia's room, Emma started crying again. By the time I got back to her, Sophia was screaming. It was a domino effect of distress, each girl's crying setting off another. I was not prepared for the physical demands. Carrying 4 toddlers up and down stairs, bending down hundreds of times to pick up dropped toys and spilled food, wrestling them into clean diapers while they kicked and screamed. My back was in agony. My knees throbbed. I had not slept more than 2 hours straight since I arrived, because one of them was always waking up crying. At 3 in the morning that first night, I found myself sitting on the floor of the hallway between their rooms, all 4 girls crying in their separate spaces, and I just broke down. I sobbed as quietly as I could, my face in my hands, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. Not even when my husband died had I felt this abandoned. Because then, I had my sons. They had rallied around me, supported me, made me believe we were a family that took care of each other. But now I understood the truth. They took care of each other when it was convenient, when it cost them nothing. The moment I needed them to prioritize my well-being over their comfort, I was disposable. The nanny that Michael had promised showed up for exactly 3 hours on the 3rd day. She was a college student who spent most of the time on her phone and left early because she had a paper due. She did not come back. I called Michael on the 4th day. I was at my breaking point. I had not showered in 2 days. There was strained carrots in my hair from when Sophia had flung her spoon at me. I was surviving on crackers and cold coffee because I did not have time to make myself real meals. The girls were finally down for their afternoon nap, and I had locked myself in the bathroom to make the call. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone twice while dialing. I could see my reflection in the bathroom mirror, a stranger with hollow eyes and slumped shoulders. My voice came out hoarse when I tried to speak, raspy from lack of sleep and too much stress. Michael answered on the 5th ring. I could hear music and laughter in the background. He sounded relaxed, happy, carefree in a way I had not heard from him in years. He asked how everything was going, his tone casual, like he was checking on a house sitter, not his elderly mother managing his 4 toddlers alone. I started to tell him I could not do this, that it was too much, that I needed him to come home. The words tumbled out in a rush, desperate and raw. I told him about the sleepless nights, about how my back was seizing up every time I bent down, about how I had not eaten a real meal in days because there was never a moment when all 4 girls were settled at once. But then I heard Sarah in the background asking who he was talking to, her voice bright with the relaxation of someone who had just spent 4 days being pampered. I heard him cover the phone partially and say it was just his mom checking in. Just his mom. Like I was an afterthought, an interruption to his vacation, not a person in crisis asking for help. My throat closed up. The words I had been about to say, the plea for him to come home early, died before I could speak them. Because in that moment, I heard the truth in his dismissive tone. He did not want to hear about my struggles. He did not want his perfect resort week interrupted by my reality. He cut me off before I could finish explaining. He said, "Mom, we really needed this." The emphasis on "we" was clear, a designation that did not include me. He said, "Please do not guilt-trip them," as if my legitimate distress was emotional manipulation. He said it was only 3 more days. Like 72 more hours of this hell was nothing, was manageable, was something I should just push through without complaint. He said the girls were lucky to have me, and I wanted to scream. Lucky? What did luck have to do with being abandoned with their grandmother who was struggling to survive each day? Then he said he had to go because their massage appointments were starting soon. Their massage appointments, while I could barely stand up straight from the pain in my back. He hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. I sat there on the closed toilet lid, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. That was when something inside me fundamentally changed. A cord that had connected me to my son, a belief that he saw me and valued me, simply snapped. I sat on the bathroom floor and cried as quietly as I could so I would not wake the babies. I cried for the mother I used to be, strong and capable. I cried for the fantasy I had built of us all being together. I cried because I had been so stupid, so desperate for their love that I had let them use me like this. That night, after I finally got all 4 girls to sleep, I wandered through Michael's house looking at his life, The expensive furniture, the large television, the photos on the walls of their family vacations. I found the stack of mail on the kitchen counter and saw the credit card bills. Michael and Sarah owed over $40,000. The resort they were staying at cost $3,000 a night. They were spending more on their anniversary week than I had in my entire savings account. I thought about the times I had given Michael money. The $10,000 for his MBA, the $5,000 when he said he needed help with a down payment, the monthly amounts I had sent when he claimed things were tight after the girls were born. I had scraped together that money from my modest pension, had eaten less and turned down my heat in winter to afford it. I had thought I was helping my son build a stable life. But here was the evidence that he had never really needed my money. He had just taken it because I offered, because I was easy, and he knew I would never ask for it back. I went to the guest room where I was sleeping and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was clearly an afterthought, furnished with their old cast-offs and a thin mattress that made my back ache even more. There was a mirror on the wall, slightly crooked. I looked at my reflection and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back at me looked old. Not dignified old, not gracefully aged, but worn down old. My hair had not been styled in days and hung limp around my face. I had dark circles under my eyes. My shoulders were slumped in defeat. My hands, those hands that had bathed my sons and worked countless hospital shifts and held my dying husband, were shaking. When had I become this person who let others treat her like a servant? When had I decided my own needs and dignity were less important than keeping the peace? I thought about my mother and realized with a sick feeling that she had been wrong. Family is not everything if family means letting yourself be destroyed. Something cracked open inside me in that moment. It was not a dramatic revelation, more like a quiet door opening to show me a room I had not known existed. A room where I could say no, where I could demand respect, where I could choose myself. I made it through the remaining 3 days on autopilot. I cared for the girls because they were innocent in all this. I fed them and changed them and comforted them. But I also started planning. I started thinking about what I needed to do when I got home. Michael and Sarah returned on the 7th day, looking tanned and rested. Sarah had a new haircut. Michael had bought himself an expensive watch at the resort gift shop. He showed it to me with pride. They swept in through the door with their suitcases and their relaxed smiles and gathered up the girls who squealed with delight at seeing their parents. Sarah asked me how it went. She did not wait for an answer before launching into stories about their week. The spa treatments, the gourmet meals, the couple's yoga classes. Michael joined in, describing the resort amenities. Neither of them seemed to notice my exhaustion. Neither of them asked if I was okay. I gathered my things in silence. Michael offered to drive me home, but I said I would take the train. I needed the space, needed to not be trapped in a car pretending everything was fine. Sarah hugged me and said we should do this again sometime. Michael pressed money into my hand, $200, like that somehow made up for everything. I took the train back to Chicago in a daze. The city looked different somehow, sharper and clearer. I walked from the station to my apartment and climbed the stairs slowly, my body protesting every step. I unlocked my door and stepped into my small, quiet space. It had never looked better to me. I did not unpack right away. Instead, I sat by the window and watched the street below. The Polish bakery was closing for the day. An old couple walked by holding hands. A mother pushed a stroller. Normal life, going on like nothing had changed. But everything had changed for me. I thought about Thomas and James. I had not heard from either of them the entire week I was gone. No check-in calls, no texts, asking how I was managing. Michael must have told them the real plan, that I was on babysitting duty while he vacationed. And they had said nothing, done nothing to defend me or question if this was right. Over the next few days, I started putting pieces together. I went through my bank statements and calculated exactly how much money I had given my sons over the years. It totaled nearly $60,000, money I could have used for my retirement, for my own comfort and security, money I had handed over because they asked, and I wanted to be a good mother. I thought about all the times I had canceled my own plans to babysit for them at the last minute. All the times I had listened to them complain about their lives while never asking about mine. All the times they had forgotten my birthday or visited only when they needed something. The pattern was so clear now. How had I not seen it before? I called my friend Margaret, another woman my age who I had known for 40 years. We had worked together at the hospital. She came over that evening and I told her everything. I expected her to be shocked, but she just nodded sadly. She said she had noticed, but had not wanted to interfere. She said her own daughter had done similar things to her until she finally put her foot down. We sat at my small kitchen table, the same table where I had eaten thousands of meals alone over the years. Margaret had brought tea, good loose-leaf tea that she knew I loved, but never bought for myself because it seemed too extravagant. She poured it carefully into my good china cups, the ones I saved for special occasions that never seemed to come. "Dorothy," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I am going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me." She reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers. Her hands were warm, solid, real. "You are not responsible for your son's happiness. You are not required to sacrifice yourself on the altar of their convenience." I started to protest, to say that family was supposed to help each other. She squeezed my hand tighter. "Listen to me. There is a difference between helping and being exploited. When my daughter was going through her divorce, I helped her. I gave her money for a lawyer. I let her stay with me for 3 months. I watched her kids when she had job interviews. That was help. That was family." She paused, her eyes holding mine. "But when she started expecting me to provide free childcare 5 days a week while she went out with friends, when she started asking for money for vacations while I was eating canned soup to make ends meet, when she threw tantrums every time I said I had other plans, that was exploitation. Margaret told me something that stuck with me. She said we teach people how to treat us. By always saying yes, by always sacrificing, by always putting their needs first, I had taught my sons that my needs did not matter. I had trained them to see me as a resource to be used rather than a person to be valued." "You know what I finally realized?" Margaret continued, releasing my hand to sip her tea. "My daughter did not actually need me the way she claimed. She needed my free labor. The moment I stopped providing it, she found other solutions. She got a job with better pay. She moved in with her boyfriend. She figured out childcare. All those things she said were impossible without me turned out to be completely possible when I was no longer an option." I thought about Michael and Sarah at their expensive resort. They had told me they could not afford full-time help, that the quadruplets were too much for daycare, that they desperately needed family support. But they could afford a $3,000 a night resort. They could afford designer clothes and expensive watches and $1 million house. They just preferred to spend their money on themselves and get labor from me for free. "What did you do?" I asked Margaret. "When you finally stopped helping your daughter, what happened?" She smiled, but it was a sad smile. She was furious. She told me I was a terrible mother. She said I was abandoning my grandchildren. She did not speak to me for almost a year. Margaret paused, looking out my window at the darkening street. But then something interesting happened. She started calling again. Not to ask for things, just to talk. And slowly, over time, we built a different relationship. One where I was not her servant. One where I was her mother and she was my adult daughter, and we related to each other as two separate people who loved each other but had our own lives. "And if that had not happened?" I asked quietly. "If she had never come back?" Margaret met my eyes again. "Then I would have been sad, but I would have survived. Because, Dorothy, the alternative was letting her destroy me. And I decided I was worth more than that." That conversation was the push I needed. Margaret helped me see that what my sons had done was not just inconsiderate or thoughtless. It was exploitation. It was financial abuse. It was emotional manipulation. And it was not my fault for feeling hurt by it. I started researching. I learned that elder financial abuse is one of the fastest growing crimes in America. I learned that family members are often the perpetrators. I learned that women my age are particularly vulnerable because we were raised to be caregivers, to sacrifice, to put others first. I learned that it was okay to protect myself. But I also knew that if I confronted my sons directly, they would make excuses. They would gaslight me, tell me I was overreacting, remind me that family helps family. I needed to be smarter. I needed to show them who I really was before I walked away. So I came up with a plan. A test, really. I called Michael and said I wanted to host a family dinner at my apartment. I said I had been doing some thinking and wanted to discuss the future with all three of my sons. Michael sounded surprised but agreed. I called Thomas and James and made the same invitation. They all said yes. I spent the week before the dinner preparing. Not food, though I did plan a simple meal. I prepared emotionally and psychologically. I rehearsed what I wanted to say. I gathered my bank statements, showing the money I had given them. I made notes about all the times they had asked me to drop everything to help them. I prepared for their reactions. Each morning that week, I woke up and practiced in front of my bathroom mirror. I would stand there, looking at my reflection, and say the words out loud. I will not be used anymore. I deserve respect. I am setting boundaries. My voice would shake at first, but by the end of the week, it was getting stronger. I pulled out every bank statement from the past 10 years. I went through them methodically, highlighting every transfer to my sons. $10,000 to Michael for his MBA, $5,000 for his down payment, monthly payments when he claimed hardship, even while he was buying expensive furniture for his new house. $3,000 to Thomas when he said he needed help after his divorce. $2,000 more a few months later for a car emergency that turned out to be a down payment on a sports car. James got the least, but still walked away with over $8,000 over the years for various crises that somehow never quite resolved. I made a spreadsheet. I am not good with computers, but Margaret's grandson helped me. We sat together at the library, him showing me patiently how to use Excel, me feeling both ancient and empowered. Seeing it all laid out in neat columns, dates and amounts and purposes made it undeniable. This was not help. This was a pattern of taking. I also wrote down every instance I could remember of dropping my own plans to accommodate theirs. The time I canceled my trip to visit my sister because Thomas needed me to watch his kids last minute, and I never did make it to see her before she died. The time I missed my own doctor's appointment to babysit for James. Postponing for months the diagnosis of my arthritis that could have been managed better with earlier treatment. The countless Sunday dinners I prepared, only for them to cancel at the last minute or show up hours late while the food went cold. The night before the dinner, I barely slept. I kept second-guessing myself. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I should just accept that this is how modern families work. Maybe I was expecting too much. But then I thought about that moment in Michael's guest room, looking at my broken reflection, and I knew I had to follow through. Around 3 a.m, unable to sleep, I got out of bed and went to my closet. In the back, behind my winter coats, was a box I had not opened in years. I pulled it out and sat on my bedroom floor, going through the contents by the light of my bedside lamp. Inside were my old art supplies, brushes stiff with age, tubes of paint dried and cracked, a palette with colors still mixed on it from decades ago, sketches I had made when I was young, full of hope and ambition. A letter of acceptance to an art program I never attended because I had gotten pregnant with Michael instead. I held that letter in my hands, the paper yellowed and fragile, and I cried. Not for the dream deferred, though that was part of it. I cried for the young woman who had set aside her passion, believing it was temporary, believing she would come back to it. never imagining that 50 years would pass in the blink of an eye. I cried for all the times I had told myself later, always later, when the boys are grown, when I have time, when it is my turn. It was supposed to be my turn now. I had raised my sons. I had worked my whole life. I had been a good mother, a good wife, a good person. And what did I have to show for it? An empty bank account and children who saw me as an ATM and free labor. No more. The word became a mantra in my head as I sat there on the floor surrounded by my abandoned dreams. No more. My sons arrived at my apartment on Sunday afternoon. Michael came with Sarah and the Quadruplets. Thomas brought his new girlfriend, a woman 20 years younger than him who looked bored before she even walked through the door. James came alone, his second divorce not yet finalized. They filled my small apartment with their noise and their presence and their expectations. I served the meal I had prepared, a simple pot roast with vegetables. We made small talk. They told me about their lives, their jobs, their problems. Not one of them asked about me. Not one of them noticed the dark circles still under my eyes, or the way I was moving carefully because my back still hurt from that week with the Quadruplets. After dinner, I cleared my throat and said I had something to discuss. They looked at me with mild interest. I could see them already starting to tune out, assuming this was about some minor household matter or nostalgic reminiscing. I started by saying I had been thinking about family time. Michael got a guilty look on his face, but said nothing. I said I wanted to propose another week of family time. I said I would love to spend a week with all of them and their families together. I said we could make it a real bonding experience. I watched their reactions carefully. Michael and Sarah exchanged a look. Thomas shifted in his seat uncomfortably. James suddenly remembered he had somewhere else to be. Not one of them jumped at the chance. Not one of them showed enthusiasm about spending concentrated time with me. That was my confirmation. That moment of hesitation, of barely concealed reluctance, told me everything I needed to know. They did not value my company. They valued my usefulness. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, actually, I had changed my mind. I said I would not be available for family time anymore. I would not be available for emergency babysitting. I would not be available to loan money. I would be busy with my own life from now on. The reaction was immediate. Michael said, "Mom, do not be like that." Sarah said, "We are family. We help each other." Thomas said he did not understand where this was coming from. James, always the most direct, asked if I was punishing them for something. I stood up from the table. My voice was shaking, but I kept going. I said I was not punishing anyone. I was simply setting boundaries. I was choosing to prioritize my own well-being for the first time in decades. I was done sacrificing myself for children who only called when they needed something. Michael tried to argue. He said I was being unfair. He said they had always been there for me. I pulled out my bank statements and laid them on the table. I showed them the $60,000. I asked them to name one time they had been there for me without me having to ask, beg, or bribe them with my presence or my money. They could not do it. The silence was damning. Sarah tried a different tactic. She said the girls needed their grandmother. She said I was being selfish. That word, selfish, coming from her mouth after what they had done to me. I almost laughed. I said the girls were welcome to visit me on my terms. I said I would be happy to see them for reasonable amounts of time with proper notice. But I would not be used as free childcare again. I would not be manipulated with guilt about family bonds that they only seemed to remember when they needed something. Thomas stood up and said this was ridiculous. He said I was having some kind of crisis. He said I should talk to someone, maybe see a therapist. The condescension in his tone, the assumption that my setting boundaries meant I was mentally unstable, made my blood boil. I asked him when was the last time he had called me just to talk. When was the last time any of them had asked about my life, my interests, my dreams? I asked them if they even knew I had wanted to be an art teacher once. I asked them if they knew I still loved to paint. I asked them if they cared at all about who I was beyond what I could do for them. None of them had answers. James was the first to leave. He muttered something about this being too much drama and walked out without even saying goodbye. Thomas followed with his girlfriend, who looked relieved to escape. Michael and Sarah lingered, Sarah crying now, saying I was breaking up the family. Michael looking angry and hurt. I told Michael to leave. I said we could talk when he was ready to hear me, but not today. He picked up one of the quadruplets who had been playing quietly on the floor, oblivious to the adult conflict. He looked at me and said he did not recognize me anymore. Good, I said. Maybe you should get to know who I actually am. They left. The door closed. My apartment was suddenly very quiet. I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the debris of the dinner and the confrontation. Dirty dishes, scattered toys, the bank statement still on the table. I felt emptied out, like something had been extracted from me, and I was not sure yet if the remaining space would fill with something better or just stay hollow. I cleaned up slowly. I washed the dishes by hand, even though I had a perfectly good dishwasher, because I needed the simple task to ground me. I put away the leftovers. I gathered up the toys the girls had been playing with and set them by the door to return next time I saw them, if there was a next time. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, something I almost never did, and sat by my window. The city lights were coming on. Somewhere out there my sons were probably talking about me, probably painting me as unreasonable or crazy or going through something. Let them, I thought. Their opinion of me no longer defined my worth. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No crying babies, no demands on my time, just my own small life waiting for me. I made coffee and sat with it, really tasting it for the first time in a week. I had forgotten what it felt like to have a morning that was just mine. But I knew the confrontation was not over. My sons were not the type to accept boundaries without a fight. I had drawn a line, and they would test it, push against it, try to make me feel guilty enough to erase it. I needed to be ready. The test came sooner than I expected. 3 days after the disastrous family dinner, I was at the library doing my volunteer reading when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. It was Sarah's mother, Barbara. We had met a handful of times over the years, pleasant enough encounters, but we were not close. Her voice was cold and accusatory. She said she had heard about what I did to Michael and Sarah. She said she could not believe I would abandon my grandchildren like that. She said she had always suspected I was not as nice as I pretended to be, and now she had proof. I was so stunned I did not know how to respond. Barbara kept going, her voice rising. She said Sarah was devastated. She said I had ruined their family dynamic. She said the girls were asking for me, and it was breaking Sarah's heart to explain that Grandma did not want to see them anymore. That last part was a lie, a deliberate, calculated lie. I had never said I did not want to see the girls. I had said I would not be used as free childcare. But Sarah had twisted my words, had called her mother and painted me as the villain who abandoned her granddaughters. I hung up on Barbara mid-sentence. My hands were shaking with rage. This was what I was dealing with. Not just my son's entitlement, but a whole network of people who would be turned against me through lies and manipulation. I called Michael immediately. He answered with a wary hello. I asked him if he had told Sarah's mother that I refused to see the girls. There was a long pause. Then he said that was not exactly what he said. He said he might have implied I was pulling away from the family. He said Barbara had drawn her own conclusions. I said he knew that was a lie. He knew I had only asked for boundaries and respect. Why was he letting his mother-in-law harass me with false information? Michael's tone changed, became harder. He said maybe I should have thought about consequences before I decided to blow up our family. He said actions have repercussions. He said if I wanted to play hardball, fine, but I should not be surprised when other people got involved. It was a threat. My own son was threatening me. I told him he was showing me exactly who he was. I told him I was done with this conversation and hung up. Then I blocked Barbara's number, and after a moment's hesitation, I blocked Michael's number too. The silence that followed was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I had cut off my own child. I had done the thing I always swore I would never do. But I also felt lighter, like I had put down a weight I had been carrying for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Thomas called next. His approach was different, more subtle. He said he was worried about me. He said maybe I was going through something, maybe menopause or depression or early dementia. He said there were resources for older adults going through mental health challenges. He said he wanted to help me get the support I needed. The patronizing concern in his voice made me want to scream. This was their strategy now. If they could not guilt me into compliance, they would question my mental fitness. They would make me doubt my own judgment. I told Thomas I was perfectly mentally sound. I said I had simply decided to stop letting my children exploit me. I asked him if he remembered the 6 months he lived in my apartment rent-free. I asked him if he remembered that during that time, I gave him my bedroom and slept on the couch because he said his back needed a better mattress. Thomas got defensive. He said that was different. He was going through a divorce and needed support. I said yes, and I gave it freely. But I asked him what he had given me in return. When had he supported me through a difficult time? When had he sacrificed his comfort for mine? He could not answer. Instead, he said I was keeping score, that family does not keep score. I said he was right. Family should not keep score. But exploitation is not family. Using someone until they have nothing left to give is not family. Thomas said I was being dramatic. He said I had always had a flair for exaggeration. That dismissal, that complete invalidation of my feelings, was somehow worse than Michael's threats. I told Thomas I loved him, but I could not have a relationship with someone who refused to see me as a full person with my own needs and limits. I said when he was ready to treat me with respect, he knew where to find me. Then I ended the call. 2 sons blocked, 1 to go. James was the last to reach out, nearly a week after the dinner. His approach was the most manipulative of all. He sent me a text message with a photo attached. It was an old picture of me holding him as a baby, both of us looking at the camera with pure love on our faces. The text said, "Remember when we had a real family? I miss that, Mom." The implication was clear. The loving mother in that photo would not set boundaries or demand respect. The real mom was the one who gave endlessly and asked for nothing. By standing up for myself, I had become someone else, someone worse. I stared at that photo for a long time. I remembered taking it. James had been about 6 months old. My husband had just gotten a promotion. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. I had been so young, so full of hope about the family we were building. That young woman in the photo had no idea what was coming. She did not know her husband would die too soon. She did not know her sons would grow up to see her as a resource rather than a person. She did not know she would spend decades giving pieces of herself away until there was almost nothing left. I felt a wave of grief for her, for that hopeful young mother. But I also felt something else. Protectiveness. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her to save something for herself, to set boundaries early, to teach her sons that her needs mattered too. Since I could not do that, I could at least honor her by finally choosing myself now. I deleted the photo from my messages. I did not block James, not yet. But I did not respond either. Let him sit with that silence and wonder. The weeks that followed were strange. I had expected to feel lonely, but instead I felt free. I started painting again. I set up a small easel by my window and spent hours mixing colors and laying them on canvas. My hands remembered the movements even after all these years. I was not good, not anymore, maybe never had been. But it did not matter. I was doing it for me. The first painting I completed was terrible by any objective standard. The proportions were wrong, the colors muddy, the composition awkward. It was supposed to be the view from my window, the Polish bakery across the street with the early morning light hitting its green awning. What I ended up with looked more like a child's finger painting. But when I stepped back and looked at it, really looked at it, I felt something I had not felt in years. Pride. Not in the technical execution, but in the fact that I had done it. I had taken time for myself and created something, however imperfect. I hung that terrible painting in my kitchen. Every time I looked at it while making my morning coffee, I smiled. It represented freedom. It represented choosing myself. I joined a local art group that met twice a week at a community center. The other members were mostly retirees like me, people looking for connection and purpose. We painted together, critiqued each other's work gently, shared coffee and cookies. Nobody wanted anything from me except my company and my honest feedback on their brushwork. The group was led by a woman named Patricia, who had been a commercial artist for 30 years before retiring. She was in her mid-60s, with silver hair she wore in a long braid and paint-stained fingers that were never quite clean. She had this way of looking at your work that was both critical and kind, seeing what you were trying to do rather than just what you had achieved. After my third session, Patricia pulled me aside. "You have an interesting eye," she said. "Raw, untrained, but there is something there. Have you ever had formal training?" I told her about the art program I had been accepted to, the one I never attended. Her face softened with understanding. "It is never too late," she said simply. "I have taught students in their 80s who created beautiful work. The only requirement is that you show up and try." Those words stayed with me. It is never too late. I had spent so many years thinking my chance had passed that the door to my dreams had closed permanently. But what if it had just been waiting for me to push it open? I made a friend there, a woman named Rose, who was 75 and had survived breast cancer twice. She painted vibrant abstracts that seemed to pulse with life. Where my work was tentative and careful, hers was bold and unafraid, swirls of red and orange and deep purple that seemed to move on the canvas. When I asked her about her process, she laughed. "At my age, with what I have been through, I do not have time to be timid," she said. "Cancer taught me that every day is borrowed time. I'm going to make the most of it." Rose became my closest friend in those months. We started meeting for lunch after art group, sitting in diners and talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her own family struggles, how her daughter had tried to put her in a nursing home to get control of her house. Rose had fought back legally and won. She was my inspiration. "My daughter thought I was an easy target," Rose told me over coffee one afternoon. We were at our usual diner, a Greek place with red vinyl booths and the best lemon potatoes in Chicago. I was 73, had just finished chemo, was weak and vulnerable. She started talking about how I could not take care of myself, how I needed full-time care, how she had found this lovely facility. What she did not say was that she had already talked to a real estate agent about selling my house. "How did you find out?" I asked. "My neighbor overheard my daughter on the phone in my driveway, talking about staging the house to maximize sale price." Rose's face hardened at the memory. "My neighbor came and told me immediately, so I called a lawyer. Turned out my daughter had already forged my signature on some preliminary paperwork for the nursing home. She was planning to have me declared incompetent." I felt sick hearing this. "What happened?" "I fought back," Rose said simply. "Got a lawyer, got a cognitive assessment proving I was perfectly mentally sound, threatened to press charges for the forgery. My daughter backed off fast when she realized I was not going to be a victim. We have not spoken in 3 years. And you know what? I am okay with that. I would rather be alone than be prey." Through Rose, I learned about elder law attorneys. I made an appointment with one, a sharp woman in her 50s named Karen, who specialized in protecting seniors from financial abuse. I showed her my bank statements, told her about the money I had given my sons, explained the pattern of exploitation. Karen was not surprised. She said she saw cases like mine all the time. She said adult children often felt entitled to their parents' money, especially if the parents had been generous in the past. She said the law in Illinois was on my side. She explained that I could pursue restitution if I wanted, could force my sons to repay at least some of what they owed me. I thought about it. The idea of taking them to court, of making this a legal battle, was tempting. They deserved consequences. But I also knew that road would consume me. I would spend years fighting, years dwelling in anger and resentment. I would become defined by this conflict. I told Karen I just wanted to make sure they could not access my money anymore. She helped me set up new accounts they did not know about. She helped me create a will that was ironclad, leaving my estate to charity rather than to my sons unless they met specific conditions, including acknowledgement of past wrongs and demonstrated changed behavior. She helped me feel protected. As I built this new life, I heard things through the grapevine. Chicago is a big city, but certain communities are small. Margaret knew someone who knew Sarah's sister. Information filtered back to me. Apparently Michael and Sarah were struggling. Without my free childcare, they were having to pay for full-time help. It was expensive, eating into their budget in ways they had not anticipated. Sarah had complained to her sister that good help was hard to find, that the nannies they hired did not care about the girls the way family did. The irony was not lost on me. Thomas had reached out to James asking if he thought I would lend him money again if he apologized. James had apparently said probably not, that I seemed really done this time. Good, I thought. Let them realize I was not coming back. I did see the Quadruplets once during this time. It was not planned. I was at the grocery store in my neighborhood when I saw Sarah pushing a cart with all 4 girls strapped in. The girls saw me first. Emma started calling Grandma, and then the others joined in, their little voices excited and happy. Sarah's face went through several emotions when she spotted me. Surprise, discomfort, something that might have been shame. She pushed the cart toward me slowly, like approaching a dangerous animal. The girls were reaching for me, asking me to pick them up. I crouched down and greeted each girl by name. I asked them about their stuffed animals, remembered which one each girl preferred. They chattered at me about their lives in that disjointed way toddlers have. I felt my heart squeeze. I did love these children. They were innocent in all of this. Sarah watched this interaction with an unreadable expression. Finally, she said, "They missed me." She said they asked about me all the time. She said it was hard explaining why Grandma did not come around anymore. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. I looked Sarah directly in the eye and said it must be hard, just like it was hard for me to be used and dismissed. Just like it was hard for me to realize my own son had lied to me and manipulated me. Sarah flinched. She opened her mouth to respond, but I kept going. I said the girls were always welcome in my life on my terms. I said I would be happy to see them for a few hours once a month with proper notice. I said I would even babysit occasionally, with advanced planning and respect for my time, but I would never again be taken for granted. Sarah nodded slowly. She looked like she wanted to say more, but did not know how. Finally, she said she would talk to Michael. She gathered up the girls and pushed the cart away. I watched them go, feeling sad, but also proud of myself for holding firm. 3 months after the family dinner, I got a letter in the mail. It was from James. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter. That surprised me enough that I sat down before opening it. The envelope was cream-colored, good quality paper, and my name and address were written in James's familiar handwriting. The same script I had watched him develop through years of homework and thank you notes. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, using my mother's old letter opener that I kept on the hall table. The letter was 3 pages long. James apologized. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking since our last conversation. He said he had started therapy, and his therapist had helped him see some hard truths about how he had treated me. He said he realized he had been taking advantage of my generosity for years. He said he was ashamed. He did not make excuses. He did not blame his divorces or his job stress or anything else. He just acknowledged what he had done and said he was sorry. He said he understood if I never wanted to speak to him again, but he hoped I would give him a chance to rebuild trust slowly. But it was the second page that made me cry. James wrote about a specific memory. He was 8 years old, and he had broken a neighbor's window playing baseball. He had been terrified to tell me, knowing we could not afford to replace it. But when he finally confessed, I had not yelled. I had sat him down, and we had talked about accountability and making amends. Together, we had figured out a plan for him to do chores to earn the money to pay for the window. It took him 3 months, but he did it. James wrote, "You taught me that mistakes are not failures if we own them and make them right. But somehow, as I got older, I forgot that lesson. I took and took from you, and I never made it right. I never even acknowledged I was taking. I convinced myself I deserved your help, that you wanted to give it, that this was just what mothers do. But you did not deserve to be treated that way. You deserve the same accountability I give everyone else in my life. You deserved better than the son I have been." I read the letter 3 times. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to think one of my sons had actually heard me and changed, but I was also wary. Words were easy, actions were what mattered. I showed the letter to Rose at our next art class. She read it carefully, her reading glasses perched on her nose, taking her time with each page. When she finished, she folded it carefully and handed it back to me. "This is a good start," she said. "But you know as well as I do that apologizing is the easy part. The question is whether he means it, whether he will actually change." "How do I know?" I asked. "How do I know if I should give him a chance or if I am just setting myself up to be hurt again?" Rose mixed colors on her palette, creating a deep purple that reminded me of bruises. "You do not know," she said simply. "That is the risk of opening yourself up again. But you can be smart about it. You can set clear expectations. You can move slowly. You can watch for consistency between his words and actions. And if at any point he starts falling back into old patterns, you can step back again. Having a relationship does not mean having no boundaries." I did not respond right away. I sat with it for a week, reading and rereading those pages. Finally, I sent a short note back. I said I appreciated his apology. I said I was willing to meet for coffee and talk, but that rebuilding our relationship would take time and consistent effort from him. I said I needed to see changed behavior, not just hear changed words. James responded immediately, suggesting a time and place. We met at a coffee shop near my apartment on a Saturday morning. He arrived early, looking nervous. He had lost weight, looked older. He hugged me carefully, like he was not sure he had the right to. We talked for 2 hours. James told me about his therapy sessions, about the patterns his therapist had helped him identify. He said he had been repeating the same mistakes in his relationships because he had never learned how to be truly intimate and vulnerable. He said he had used people, including me, to avoid dealing with his own issues. "My therapist asked me to describe my relationship with you," James said, stirring his coffee absently. "And I realized I could not do it. I could tell her things you had done for me, money you had given me, times you had helped me, ways you had supported me. But I could not tell her anything about you. What you liked, what you dreamed about, what made you happy. I knew you as a function, not as a person." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I did not even know you wanted to be an art teacher. Mom, that is such a fundamental thing about who you are, and I never knew it, because I never asked. I never saw you as someone with your own interior life. You were just Mom, the person who was there when I needed something." I felt something crack open in my chest. This was what I had needed to hear. Not just sorry for the specific incidents, but acknowledgement that he had fundamentally failed to see me as a whole person. "When did that shift happen for you?" I asked. "When did I become just a function instead of a person?" James thought about it. "I think it was gradual. When I was little, I knew you as Mom who painted sometimes, Mom who sang in the car, Mom who made up stories. You were a person with quirks and interests and moods. But somewhere along the way, especially after Dad died, you became stable, reliable, always available. You never said no. You never had conflicts or needs that competed with mine. So I stopped checking if you did." I listened. I did not absolve him or tell him it was okay, but I did acknowledge his honesty. I told him about my own journey over the past few months, about the art classes and the new friends and the sense of self I was building. He listened without judgment or defensiveness. I am learning to paint again, I told him. Not very well, but that is not the point. The point is, I am doing something just for me, something that feeds my soul instead of depleting it. James smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I would love to see your work sometime, if you want to share it. That was the moment I felt the shift. He was asking, not demanding. He was giving me space to say no. Such a small thing, but it mattered enormously. At the end of our conversation, James asked if he could call me sometimes, just to check in. Not to ask for anything, just to talk. I said yes, but I also said I would not always be available. I said I had my own life now, and he would need to respect that. He agreed. That was the beginning of a slow, cautious reconnection with James. He called once a week, always at times we had agreed upon beforehand. He asked about my art, my friends, my life. He shared about his therapy, his work, his struggles with loneliness. It felt different than our previous relationship. More balanced, more real. Michael and Thomas remained blocked. I occasionally heard updates about them through James, who was apparently trying to repair his relationships with his brothers too. Michael was resentful, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Thomas was confused, genuinely seeming not to understand what he had done wrong. James said he had tried to explain it to them, but they were not ready to hear it. I felt sad about losing those relationships, but I also felt relieved. I had spent so much energy trying to maintain connections with people who did not value me. Now that energy was freed up for better things. 6 months after the confrontation, I took my first real vacation in 15 years. Rose and I booked a week in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We stayed in a small bed and breakfast, spent our days visiting art galleries and painting in the desert, our evenings drinking wine and talking under the stars. The flight alone felt like an act of rebellion. I had flown so rarely in my life, always telling myself it was too expensive, too frivolous. But Rose had insisted, had helped me book the tickets online, had refused to let me back out when I got nervous about the cost. "You have given away $60,000 to your sons," she said bluntly. "You can spend $800 on a plane ticket for yourself." Santa Fe was like stepping into a different world. The air was dry and clean, nothing like Chicago's humidity. The sky was impossibly blue, stretching forever in every direction. The light had a quality I had never experienced before, sharp and clear, making colors more vivid. I understood immediately why so many artists were drawn to this place. Our bed and breakfast was a small adobe building run by a couple in their 60s who had moved there from New York to escape the corporate grind. Every morning, they served breakfast on a patio surrounded by desert plants I could not name, and we would eat fresh fruit and homemade bread while watching hummingbirds dart between flowers. Rose and I spent our days wandering through galleries, seeing work by artists who had dedicated their lives to their craft. I felt both inspired and intimidated. These people had chosen art, had made it central to their lives, had not let anything stop them. What could I have created if I had made different choices all those years ago? But Rose would not let me dwell in regret. "You are here now," she said firmly when I voiced these thoughts. "Stop looking backward. Look at what is in front of you." One afternoon, we drove out to a spot Rose had found online, a stretch of desert with red rock formations and scrubby plants and nothing else for miles. We set up our portable easels and painted for hours. The sun beat down on us, hot and relentless. My neck burned despite the sunscreen. My water bottle was soon empty, but I was happier than I could remember being. It was the most relaxed I had felt since before my husband died. Maybe ever. I realized I had spent my entire adult life in service to others. My husband, my sons, my patients at the hospital. I had never asked what I wanted or needed. I had never prioritized my own joy. Standing in the New Mexico desert with a paintbrush in my hand and the sun warm on my face, I felt something shift deep inside me. This was what life could be. this sense of freedom and purpose and peace. I had almost missed it entirely. "Thank you," I said to Rose as we packed up our supplies that evening, the sun setting in spectacular shades of orange and pink. "For what?" she asked. "For showing me it is not too late. For proving that life does not end just because we are old. For being my friend." Rose smiled, that fierce smile of hers that had seen so much and refused to be diminished by any of it. "Dorothy, you did this yourself. I just happened to be here when you finally decided you were worth it." When I returned to Chicago, I felt renewed. My apartment looked different to me, smaller maybe, but also cozier. My own space shaped by my own choices. I had new paintings to hang on the walls, landscapes from Santa Fe that I was proud of. I had stories to tell and memories that were just mine. James came to visit and see my new paintings. He brought his current girlfriend, a woman his own age who seemed kind and genuine. We had dinner together at my apartment, a simple meal that I made without stress or performance. It felt easy, natural, like what family should be. As they were leaving, James hugged me again. He said thank you for not giving up on me. I said I had not given up on him. I had just refused to let him destroy me. There was a difference. A few weeks later, I got a message from Sarah asking if I would be willing to see the girls. She said they were asking about me constantly. She said she and Michael had talked and they wanted to respect my boundaries. She proposed a visit at my apartment, 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon, with both her and Michael present. I thought about it carefully. I talked it through with Rose and with Margaret. They both said it was my choice, that I should do what felt right for me. I decided to say yes, but on very specific terms. I told Sarah they could come, but I would not be doing childcare. This was a visit, not a babysitting session. I said if the girls needed anything, Sarah and Michael would handle it. I was there as a grandmother, not as free labor. Sarah agreed. The visit happened. It was awkward at first. Michael could barely look at me. Sarah was overly cheerful in that way people are when they are uncomfortable. But the girls were genuinely happy to see me. They showed me their toys, their drawings, their new words. I sat on the floor with them and we played together. Michael and Sarah watched from the couch. At one point, Michael tried to ask me to get the girls a snack from my kitchen. I looked at him and said, "The kitchen is that way. You can handle it." Sarah elbowed him and he got up without arguing. It was a small victory, but it mattered. I had held my boundary. I had not let old patterns reassert themselves. The visit lasted exactly 2 hours. When it was time to go, the girls cried a little, not wanting to leave. Sarah promised they would come back soon if I wanted. I said once a month sounded good. Michael finally met my eyes and nodded. He did not apologize, but there was something in his expression that looked almost like respect. After they left, I cleaned up the toys and sat in my quiet apartment. I felt okay. Not ecstatic, not devastated. Just okay. The relationship with Michael and his family would probably never be what I had once hoped it would be. But maybe it could be something else, something more honest, even if it was more distant. Thomas remained a mystery. James said he had tried talking to him, but Thomas insisted I was the one who needed to apologize. He seemed genuinely convinced that I had overreacted to nothing, that I had destroyed our family for no reason. James said he did not think Thomas would ever come around. I made peace with that. Not every relationship could be saved. Not every person was capable of growth or self-reflection. Thomas might spend the rest of his life believing he was the victim in our story. I could not control that. I could only control my own choices and my own boundaries. I continued building my new life. I took more art classes, tried different mediums. I started volunteering at a senior center, teaching basic painting to other older adults. Sharing my knowledge and passion with people who genuinely wanted to learn was deeply satisfying. I dated a little, went to dinner with a man I met through the art group. It did not turn into anything serious, but it reminded me that I was still a woman with desires and possibilities, not just a mother and grandmother. That felt important. On my 73rd birthday, I threw myself a party. I invited Rose, Margaret, my art group friends, James and his girlfriend, and a few neighbors. I did not invite Michael or Thomas. It was the first birthday party I had ever thrown for myself. My apartment was full of people who genuinely cared about me, people who asked questions about my art and my life, people who toasted to my health and happiness without expecting anything in return. James gave a short speech about how proud he was of me for choosing myself. Several people cried, including me. It was not a perfect life. I still had moments of loneliness, still woke up sometimes missing the fantasy family I had thought I had. I still wondered what would happen as I got older and needed care. Would any of my sons step up, or would I be alone? But those fears no longer controlled me. I was building a support network beyond blood family. Rose had promised we would look out for each other as we aged. The senior center had resources for older adults. I had options. Most importantly, I had myself. I had my art, my routines, my small pleasures. I had learned to value my own company, to find joy in solitude rather than viewing it as punishment. I had learned that being alone was not the same as being lonely. 1 year after the confrontation, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to my sons, but to myself. I wrote about everything I had learned, everything I had survived. I wrote about the person I used to be and the person I was becoming. I wrote about forgiveness, not for my sons but for myself, for all the years I had let myself be diminished. I sealed that letter and put it in a box with my other important documents. Someday, maybe when I was gone, someone would read it and understand my story. Understand that what looked like a family falling apart was actually a woman finally learning to stand up. I think about my mother sometimes and wonder what she would make of all this. Would she be disappointed in me for setting boundaries with my sons? Or would she understand that her advice about putting family first had left me vulnerable to exploitation? I would never know. But I chose to believe she would want me to be happy, to be valued, to be free. The city of Chicago continued its rhythms around me. Seasons changed. The bakery across the street got new owners, but kept making the same bread. The neighborhood evolved, but remained familiar. And I evolved too, slowly but surely becoming someone I was proud to be. I learned that it was never too late to choose yourself. Never too late to set boundaries or demand respect. Never too late to discover who you are beyond the roles others have assigned you. The years I had left might not be many, but they would be mine. Truly, fully mine. That was worth more than all the money I had given away, more than all the sacrifices I had made. It was worth everything. Looking back, I can see how the pain shaped me into someone stronger. I can see how the betrayal taught me discernment. I can see how the loneliness led me to real connection with people who valued me. It was not the path I would have chosen, but it was the path that set me free. And freedom, I discovered, tastes like morning coffee savored slowly, like paint on a canvas chosen for no reason but joy, like saying no without guilt, like choosing yourself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. That is what I want you to understand. That is what I need you to hear. Your worth is not determined by how much you give or how little you ask for in return. Your value is inherent, unchangeable, yours. If you are sitting there right now feeling used, feeling dismissed, feeling like you have given everything and received nothing, I see you. I was you. And I am here to tell you that it is okay to stop. It is okay to set boundaries. It is okay to choose yourself. You deserve respect. You deserve consideration. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can provide. And if the people in your life cannot or will not give you that, it is okay to step back. It is okay to protect yourself. You are not being selfish. You are not being cruel. You are not abandoning anyone. You are finally caring for the person who has been neglected the longest. You. So here is what I learned and what I hope you will learn too. Protect your resources. Not just your money, though that matters. Protect your time, your energy, your peace of mind. Identify exploitation before it destroys you. Watch for the patterns. People who only call when they need something, who disappear when you need help, who take your generosity for granted. Set boundaries and hold them even when it hurts, even when people cry or get angry or call you names, even when you doubt yourself. Hold those boundaries like your life depends on it, because in many ways, it does. Build a life that is yours. Find your art, whatever that looks like. Create connections with people who give as much as they take. Invest in yourself the way you have been investing in others. You deserve it. You have always deserved it. And know that it is never too late. I was 72 when I finally stood up for myself. 72 years of putting others first, and I still found the strength to change. If I can do it, so can you. Your story is not over. This is not the end. This is a new beginning. Have you experienced something like this in your own life? Have you felt used or manipulated by family members who claim to love you? Have you struggled with setting boundaries because you were taught that family always comes first? I want to hear from you. Tell me your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, if it helped you see your situation more clearly or gave you courage to make a change, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. These stories matter. Your story matters. Let us reach the people who are sitting alone right now, feeling like they have no choice but to accept mistreatment from family. Together, we can remind each other that we always have a choice. We can always choose ourselves. We can always start again. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself. You are worth it.